Yes, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Cynthia, Alex, Neha.
Morning, everyone. Good day to all of you here.
Excellent. So looking forward to this webinar. So Cynthia, let's go ahead and get started.
Sounds good. Thanks everyone for joining us here today. We're happy to have you back for part 3 of our webinar series with Clay HR, the Incredible Talent Framework. And today we're covering consistent follow-up and follow-through. My name is Cynthia Hart. I'm with Emergent, and thanks so much for joining us today.
So welcome, everyone.
I'd like to take some time to introduce today's featured speakers. Emergent's chairman and CEO, Alex Adamopoulos, is the featured speaker for today, and his career spans 30 years in professional services. He's led the development of VFQ, which stands for Value Flow Quality, which is one of the industry's leading work-based learning and transformation methodologies, and he has an extensive background in large enterprise. And he's also a published author, active speaker, and contributor to organizations like Forbes. He's an active member with the Drucker Forum and an advisory board member to the Drucker Society. You can follow him on LinkedIn at below. Thank you for joining us today, Alex.
Thanks, Cynthia. Good to be here.
I'd also like to take time to introduce Dr. Amrinder Arora, who I think most people on the call will know is Clay HR's co-founder and CEO. Welcome, Amrinder.
Thank you, Cynthia. And the funny thing I'll mention is that at one time I quoted Drucker to Alex. That was well before I knew that Alex was on the society. So of course he knows much more about his work than I did, but it was fun. So.
That's a fun fact. Thank you. So today, I'd like to kind of just give you a brief update of what we'll be covering. So we want to talk about Emergent's journey with Clay HR and how we're using the system for the Incredible Talent Framework, why performance management needs to change. We'll give you a recap of the earlier parts in our series, Command of the Business and Smart Work Ethic. And Alex will dive into today's topic, which is all about consistent follow-ups and follow-through. And we'll just end with a little bit about us and Q&A.
Excellent. I think this sounds like a good agenda.
Thank you, Amrinder. Over to you.
Sounds good. So I think just to get started here, today I'm really excited to see what Alex will have to share with us some of the best practices around a couple of key topics here. Like as many of you know, this is the third in the 5-part series here. So here, one of the context here we're setting is that, okay, you're using, from our perspective, from Clay HR's perspective, you're using the HCM suite, the tools to manage performance, to manage your team, manage your talent journey, whether it's career pathway, whatever it is here. But then the tools are great, key. We're glad that we're all on board and trying to make things better. But still, the content and process is just as important, if not more. So one of the questions that we always wonder about is that in your performance process, are you asking the right questions? Are you focused really on the outcomes? Are you trying to make your process geared towards your end business outcomes? So in a way, are you using the tool, the software, in the best possible way possible? So that's exactly what we want to hear Alex talk about today. And today we'll specifically be talking about the follow-up and the follow-through part of that. We have already covered some part of it earlier around the smart work ethic earlier, but today we want to focus on the follow-up and follow-through part here. So Alex, we're excited to hear what you might have to present for us today.
Thank you, Amrinder. Okay, I guess we should dive in. I think one of the things that we have done in the previous sessions is kind of give you a context of why we're discussing that. So if we can go to the next slide, that would be great. So this isn't news to anyone. We've shared this slide before. We're sharing it again only because it's a recent piece of research from this year on performance management and why it needs to change. I think the key message we've shared before, which if this is your first time hearing is really that regardless of the fact that there are over 70% that support career development with employees as an objective, as a primary objective, only less than a third are only really evaluating it fairly in terms of how the employee feels. And this is a common trend that we see across many businesses. I would say even as a company, we probably have a challenge ourselves. Every company, really needs to focus on performance management. We could all make the claim we do it better than the next company, and that's fine. But the truth is, if the research is right across thousands of companies that either evaluated or interviewed for these types of research studies, these trends are not dissimilar than other trends we see in terms of how hard it is to bring change, culture, mindset shifts inside a company. So wanted to share this because it's a good backdrop for the next piece of research I wanted to kind of bring to your attention, which is really another fascinating fact on the topic of follow-up and follow-through. So there's been an HBR study. If we could just go to the next slide, that would be great. And this HBR research paper, it's not too old. Not sure if anyone's seeing the slide, but I haven't seen it shift.
Alex, we can see the shift. I think we're able to. Yeah, we're on this.
All right, good. No, good. So we kind of titled this slide "Follow-up Really Matters," right? Because this HBR article, where it says it's at the bottom, if you want to look it up and maybe read it yourself for your organization, so stop trying to delight your customers. Really, the basis of it is that it brings out the truth that there's a real gap on the topic of following up inside organizations or even outside organizations. In this context, a customer can be both internal or external. If you're an HR executive, then the people that you serve inside your business are technically your customers. So it's not just the people outside the company that would share similar statistics, right? And when you have half of the people that were studied for this HBR article saying customers complain about poor follow-up, that's a pretty big percentage for all of us to consider. And I wouldn't say it's an untruth. I would say in many of our organizations, we do have challenges following up and even following through, and I'll explain a little bit more about that difference later. But notice what it tells us here, right? While 48% of customers that experience poor follow-up have that experience, they're still going to go tell at least 10 people about it. And I think we have to be mindful that these kinds of things can trickle down inside our organizations and be, could have a negative impact on our culture or the way that we're trying to embed change or even trying to do performance management when some of these realities exist.
Yeah, I mean that's quite telling actually. That's a fascinating study. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but this seems fascinating.
Yeah, it tells an interesting story, and I do think we've all experienced it. We all have people in the organization that have gone through that. All right, so let's go through our first poll question. Right. So, Amrinder, are you reading this one or am I?
Yeah, okay, I can read it. So essentially, I think the question just is, and I think it's already on, so people are answering. Some people have started to answer, but the question is, what words or phrases would you associate most with the phrase consistent follow-up and follow-through? So let's see, which one would you choose? And some people have started to answer. Yeah, so we'll give you 30 seconds or so. But Alex, while people are answering that question, I saw an interesting study, not super related to what you're saying, but still about follow-up and follow-through. It came yesterday through one of the Sastra websites, Sastra newsletter. In the sales context, I thought that was very fascinating too. They found that if you follow up within 5 minutes versus within 10 minutes, your closure rate goes up. So that was really, really interesting. I thought it was, one wouldn't think that should matter much. That should be it's a matter of minutes, but still, it was I thought it was very fascinating there. And on another topic there, like how you were talking about internal and external customers. there was a long discussion at the last at the Millennium Alliance's conference in June this year. I was in the panel, and the two panelists really had a big disagreement on that significant point. They kept going back and forth, and they said no, an external customer is always external. And I think the person who was that viewpoint was the CHRO of State Farm, in insurance company in the US. But many other people felt no, customers can be internal or external. So I just thought maybe people might want to say that, hey, sometimes it's not so cut and dry on which one people think is the external or internal customer there.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, but let's go ahead and close out the poll. If you have not yet answered, we see 70% people have already answered. If not, we're gonna close out the poll in 5 seconds. So if you would like, go ahead, take the last seconds here to go ahead, choose that. Okay, we're close to 80%. Oh, we're closing the poll now then. Yeah. And can you share the results? Okay, here we go. So Alex, I don't know how you view these.
Well, I think it's spot on. I think, you know, what this tells us is that people have interpreted the phrase accurately. It really is primarily about delivering on commitments. The other 4 areas are important. They're very important, but ultimately they roll up into, do we deliver on the things that we are committed to doing? So it's, I'd say it's exactly what it should be in terms of a percentage.
Got it. Okay, great.
Great. Okay. If we can get to the next portion.
And I'm still stuck on the Incredible Talent Framework recap here, but maybe.
All right, there we go.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, it's all right. We have a lag. We can deal with it. It's technology. It happens. So, yeah, I just did want to give you a recap. We have covered this in the first 2 series that we did, and just to do a quick recap. So the Incredible Talent Framework is something Emergent developed a few years back. We've been bringing it to life inside our organization. We've recently configured it to live inside the Clay HR platform. I'll show you some screenshots in a moment. Why did we do this? We did this because we did a bit of our own internal study over the years. Where we've been around since 2009. And as a company that largely focuses on transformation, change, embedding good values and culture inside businesses, all within the context of, you know, a digital world, people have to work differently, and we're constantly telling people they have to work differently and also think differently. Well, this clearly applies to us as a company. And when we sat down and we thought about what does that mean, we designed these 5 principles as the foundation for how we operate in the business. It starts with having command of the business. If you were on the first webinar, you would have seen that. You know, understanding the company that you're in and the work that you do. Last time we talked about smart work ethic. This was all about showing up well and, you know, not just putting in long hours to prove a point, but actually using your time as efficiently as possible to get results and being more results oriented. Today, we're talking about consistent follow-up and follow-through in a moment. And then in the next series, we'll be covering what does it mean to be philosophically aligned, and what does it mean to be in the right role? Because ultimately, being in the right job is something we all aspire to be, and it brings the most value to the business. So if we talk about a little bit about how this works on the next slide, we can kind of show you the cycle of how it comes together. So for us, and again, I'll show you the screenshots in a moment, it starts with what we call a profile. And we do a talent profile for our team members. And this is in the form of an assessment, understanding where they currently are against the 5 principles in the framework. This then leads to objective setting, where we work together. Managers work with their team members to assign objectives, come up with the right measures, agree what great looks like and how we're going to get there, because those are really important things. And then the system allows us to do regular check-ins with the team member to make sure progress is happening, and ultimately do a retrospective, which then lets us look back. And really what this gives us is two things. One is a set of lagging indicators, right? We can look back at the output and the results, and we can make a judgment or an assessment of how progress was achieved or not. And also leading indicators, it informs us of what's possible in the future and maybe any changes or tweaks we need to make. I mean, sometimes objectives are too big. Sometimes we haven't been as finely detailed about them. So it's not a one-sided conversation between the manager and the team member. It's a collaboration that helps them in their career development, but also helps the company maximize the value out of the work that's being done. This lag is good, Amrinder, because I can take a breath and think about my next thoughts.
So,
all right.
I mean, the slide that we're currently looking at, I think I can just make a quick point here when Alex picks up back here, is that what some people might see this particular slide and might see a totally different menu. Again, it's just simply because the way Emergence team uses the ClayHR framework, they go into the menu to customize the setup to customize the menu as you can. So this is how, in their context, it makes more sense for them, because trying to implement the incredible talent journey into the system. But of course, if your menu looks a little different, that's perfectly fine. Ultimately, the content inside is what matters.
Yeah, and I think you captured it, right? We've taken the opportunity to embed the framework inside the navigation, so it's easy to follow, and our managers and our team members know how to work through it. And then what that leads to is, on the next slide, is the beginning of how it comes together. As I mentioned, there's a profile assessment that we do with the employees, the team members, and we do it against each of the 5 principles in the framework, and that develops a scoring system. So it's quite straightforward. We've tried to simplify it because it needs to be a conversation. The other thing that we really appreciate about using the ClayHR platform and its configurability and the way we've been able to use it is keeping it simple, right? Not having a complex set of activities that actually slow down the process, or maybe even discourage the process for a manager or a team member to interact with it. So the profile assessment is the key piece. And then on the next screen, you can see where some of the objectives come to life. So once you have a profile assessment, you can then work with the team member to embed each of the objectives you mutually believe are most important to the person, but also to the company. In this screenshot, you can see the first 2 principles of the framework, command of the business and smart work ethic, where we've captured some of those objectives, and then we measure them according to their progress.
Right. And I think just a quick point that I can make here is that, firstly, kudos to the Emergent team that in one sense they follow the process extremely well, which is kind of what you would hear from the textbook too, that first of all, when you do the performance assessment, like in the profile assessment in the previous screen, as Cynthia showed, that here the objectives that are being created are created as an outcome of that. So you can exactly get to work on what you need to work on. And the second thing, a little bit from the system perspective that I can clarify, is that the command of the business in a generic ClayHR terminology would be considered an objective type, but because for Emergent that is the key area, this is how that's set up, and that's how it makes it easy for the employees and the team to kind of look at, oh yeah, this is my objective for command of the business, this is my objective for smart work ethic, and they see it again. It keeps the interface very simple for them. Another key part that you can see is how the key results have been embedded inside the objective. And of course, as you all well know, you can nest objectives inside objectives to make sure that your objectives and your team's objectives are well aligned with each other. And also same thing for key results. So if, for example, somebody's key result is that I want to get this done from 0 to 78, and they farm it out to their team, as the team members make progress on the key result, the master key result, the higher level key result will automatically update. And that's one of the advantages of that as well. And in that sense, I think that's all done very, very well in the way it's currently laid out here.
Right, thank you. Okay, so let's spend a few minutes on the topic. Let's just dive right in. Just to recap this HBR article, I just want to emphasize these 2 points, right? We know from the article, and some of us know from personal experience, that people who have a bad experience tell other people, right? We know this. We know this as consumers. We know this as employees. We know this as friends and family. We do this. You go out to eat, isn't a great experience. You tell your friends, maybe you don't want to go eat there. Food's not very good. Its service wasn't very good. This happens in companies all the time. An employee doesn't necessarily have a good performance review, doesn't have a good conversation with another employee. Maybe a project's not going the way it should, and the follow-up to it is not very positive. Well, that gets shared in the business, and sometimes it's unfair. You can't always tell where the real source of truth is, but the reality is, one of the reasons we have made follow-up and follow-through a key principle is because there are things that we can be deliberate and intentional about in terms of measuring, teaching, coaching, that can try and improve the experiences of follow-up, so we don't get to the place, or at least we minimize the noise and minimize the possibility of people sharing bad experiences internally. So that's the reason we wanted to recap this statistic, and I would encourage you to go have a look at the article. There's many more like it, but we chose this one because some of the percentages resonated with us. So once we dive in now, let me talk about some of the key areas of this topic. So you took the poll question, so you'll recognize the 5 terms that we asked you about. Most of you, or half of you, I would say, picked number 1 as really important, or in terms of what it means when you hear the follow-up and follow-through phase. So just to cover them quickly, and then we'll get into how we actually assess them. Yeah, that's exactly what number 1 is about. It means that a person can be trusted to meet the expectations that have been communicated, and with the spirit of no surprises. So one of the key challenges with follow-up is often you are surprised because there isn't any follow-up, and you thought there might have been, or the follow-up that did take place wasn't exactly what was agreed. So the deliver on commitment thing isn't just being responsible to do what you've been asked or what's expected of you in a role, or all of us in a job. It's also about making sure that the output of that commitment is visible and hasn't happened in the way that surprises your colleagues and your business. So it's a positive experience, not a negative one. On good collaboration, we look at this and we think about it as being someone who's proactive. Someone who takes responsibility to initiate a conversation with team members, someone who looks for opportunities to build relationships in the business, isn't necessarily staying out of the circle of communication, but looks for ways to, create positive activity, good energy, find ways to, improve the company, improve the work, in the spirit of collaboration. It's a very specific kind of, I'm going to go do this. And it's another form of follow-up, because good collaborators are also good at following through. They will follow through on a task or an action. They won't just engage and then disengage. They actually stay involved, which then kind of speaks to the whole being decisive and intentional thing. I think when I think of being decisive and intentional, I think of taking actions that help everybody in the work, in the team. We, as a company, don't benefit, and you might share this sentiment, we don't benefit when we have people that are mavericks or people that think it's okay to work in isolated, areas of the company. Sometimes people use the word autonomy. I want to work in an autonomous fashion. That's okay. Autonomy is good as long as the other side of that coin is accountability. So you can have autonomy, but you have to also be accountable back to the business on what your work looks like. And part of that is, supportive of being decisive and intentional. We want people to take actions. Sometimes in the past, we used to say to people, ask forgiveness, not permission. Some people misinterpret that phrase. It's not do whatever you want, it's okay, we'll forgive you. It's we're hiring you as a experienced person to do a job. We're trusting you to do a job. We want you to be an initiator, and we want you to be someone that can bring your good talent to the business. So it's okay to be decisive and intentional because that helps us, but it also has to result in positive outcomes for everyone it touches.
So Alex, before you go to the fourth one, I mean, that I think is really a very key point there. Like people will often misinterpret what autonomy means, or people will often misinterpret what, ask forgiveness, not permission, what that means. It's not like really, like you said, doesn't mean just do anything you want. It's still, you have to still align with that. And I have a feeling that the fourth webinar in this series, the philosophical alignment, will actually also cover some of that point too, that you don't have to just do, we really don't want, of course we want people to be independent, to be able to say, okay, I'm going to take this decision, but still they're working in alignment with what has been laid out for them. So I think in that sense, the objectives that have been laid out within the objective, how they're going to do, that's probably where the autonomy comes from, but overall still have to work in alignment with that.
Absolutely. And I think we need to remember that we all work for somebody. I mean, autonomy is a misunderstood word. Like, I work for the board of directors of my company, but I also work for my employees. I'm here to serve them. I don't get to make autonomous decisions on their behalf without having good feedback loops, or I've gone and had conversations, because then that's not really being not only a good leader, but you're not helping yourself. And I think it's a misunderstood term. So number 4 talks about completing the work. Okay, what's the difference between this and delivering on commitments? The difference is that delivering on commitments means I can expect you to finish what you started. Completing the work is I can expect you to finish what you started well, meaning you complete the work, it's a good product, we can use it in the business, whatever it is. And this obviously helps. So this is how many of us are measured when it comes down to performance management. Someone looks at our objectives and says, you did it, or you didn't do it, or you only did it 50%. And that may be the way some of you, assess teams in your business. But completing the work shows that you've followed through. Let me give you an example, or maybe I'll save it for the next slide when I tell you how we measure, because I think I have an example I often share that comes from the sales function in a company. It's a good example on completing the work. So the last one is good communication. No one's going to disagree with us, right? We talk about communication as people, as companies, all the time. How we communicate sends messages, but sometimes how we communicate is also misunderstood. If I'm operating in a way because I'm heads down on a project and I'm really into this, or I've had a number of meetings and I've just had a busy day, that may tell, and you're looking or watching me, you might think I'm being indifferent, I'm not interested. It could just be that I'm overwhelmed with the day and the work. Okay, we often interpret communication differently. But when we look at it in terms of the business and as an incredible talent framework principle, we're looking at the person in the company and we ask the question, are they operating with a sense of awareness? Do they have EQ? Do they get the importance of the work that we're asking them to do? Do they know that if they don't get back to someone, to your point, Amrinder, in 5 minutes versus 10 minutes, that it might have a material impact on the outcome of a deal or of revenue or customer satisfaction? So communication isn't how I speak only, it's also how I behave. And, and also the speed or the intent at which I behave or communicate. So not everything's urgent. There's also a big challenge we all have between, I guess, identifying urgency versus what's important versus urgent. But it is important for us to have that sense of awareness. So we can move on to the next slide. And for our next poll question. Right. So which aspect of the consistent follow-up and follow-through do you believe your team would need most based on what we just talked about?
Okay, so the poll is on here. Like Alex said, you can select one of those. And also, there's a good reminder that if you have any questions, please use the, oh, I see some people have started to respond to the poll. Yeah, we'll leave it open for 20, 30 seconds here. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the question panel. We will have some questions. We'll have some time for the Q&A at the end. So if you don't see the question and answer panel, it should be right above the poll. So you should see a question panel. You can ask your question there. Okay, so let's see on the poll here. Still a touch under 50% have voted. So please, if you would like, go ahead, take a moment here to answer that. Okay, we have crossed the 50%. Let's get to 65 maybe, and then, oh, we're already at 70. Okay, we're gonna close the poll question in 10 seconds. So if you have not yet answered, please go ahead and take it. So which aspect of the consistent follow-up and follow-through do you believe your team needs most? Okay, I think that should be good with 76%. So here we go. Okay. So Alex, that's you have there you have the results.
Okay, that's really interesting. 60% take more interest in initiative and working with people. Yeah, I guess that's a smart one to choose. Why? Because if you do that, you will likely eliminate more surprises. That's true. You will actually probably help improve being more action oriented versus, doing nothing. And this is also a challenge because of the massive shift in remote work that's happened since the pandemic and people adjusting to almost an full-time at home life with their jobs. It's become a difficult thing to adapt to. So yeah, I'm not surprised. I think it's good that everyone, not everyone of course, but the majority looked at number 2. It's a good choice.
Also, I think it reminds me of one thing about this, about the surprises. In general, people, people think, oh, people love surprises, but reality, no. Nobody at work loves surprises. People. When I was starting out in my career, I had a boss who explained it to me. He said, okay, all your surprises, save them for your significant other. Don't bring them to the office. There's nobody likes a surprise at the office. Just here, whatever you said you're going to do, the presentation you're going to make that one. Don't surprise people at the end, changing things. So it still reminds me of that person when I hear about this one.
You're absolutely right. The no surprise thing is such a challenge in work. I don't know how we solve it, but we're always aspiring to solve it. Okay, real brief, some of the ways we might measure some of these at Emergent, and as you think about your organization, none of these are, complex measures, but how do we know delivering on commitments is happening? Well, we see the output. We've agreed a piece of work and it's been done as we've asked. We recently had an experience where we had to look at a performance management challenge in our business, and we had to communicate to a team member some hard messages, and the team agreed how to communicate this effectively. But then when everybody left the call, nobody followed through on the process the way it was agreed. Therefore, we had surprises. And I would say that the communication in that process did not go well. You've probably had similar things happen in your organization, and they happen. So I think an emphasis on agreeing the work, part of this is writing it down, making sure it's contextual, making sure people understand what they're being asked to do. And then, monitoring that output is a good way to, deliver on commitments and help people understand the importance of it. On collaboration, we see this through the lens of being active in the business and being a good conversationalist. In other words, don't be invisible, especially in the remote working world where many of us now are at home on Teams calls, Zoom calls. We don't have people interaction. It's not as easy to say, hey, do you have 5 minutes? Want to get a coffee? Want to talk? Especially where we're all separated often. Being visible in the business takes more work, takes more effort. Other than planned calls, or if you're on a team that has, stand-ups or check-ins, those are more planned, of course. We also see this through the lens of, are people asking for help? Are they out there saying, I have a point of view? So the visibility factor, the visualization of your work, the visibility of your presence in the business really helps with number 2. On number 3, this comes through, offering ideas. We love to see people bring forth ideas, be intentional about them. We love to see them challenge things that are going on in the business. We have many forums in our company where groups of people are talking all the time on different topics. Sometimes they're more public on our Teams channels where we might bring up a topic and you get lots of people interacting on it. Those are good things. We don't mind controversial, provocative conversations. We want to challenge. We want to make sure we understand people's point of view. And I think that's the way that gives people an environment where they feel safe and they feel like they can have a conversation. But the key thing that we love to see too is this last bullet. We love to see people take initiative when there's uncertainty. Sometimes uncertainty for people makes them go stop, makes them pause, makes them feel like they can contribute. I often will tell people, like, if you look at the work we do for customers, part of our work is teaching people how to be comfortable with the uncomfortable and also be more certain about uncertainty. In other words, everyone knows that does project management or has done transformations. The reason the statistics say 70% of transformations fail, for example, is because someone went in with all this idea of certainty that they were going to get X when you can't really be that certain. So we encourage people to act when there's uncertainty and be more intentional about how they show up. On completing the work, this is about looking at the benefits of the output. Is the work producing results that we believe map to the company's objectives, to the team's objectives, to the individual objectives? That's an easy one. Completing the work, depending on what your work is in the business, it can be measured. And then on good communication, it's about informing the team, making sure people know what's going on, having attention to detail. One of my examples I mentioned that I'd say about sales was, I've seen this time and time again, right? Someone might go on a sales call or have a sales call, a virtual one, good conversation with a prospect or even an existing client, and agree that, there are some follow-up actions. And the follow-up action might be, well, I'll send you some more information about the company. I'll send you this thought paper. I'll follow up with these case studies. I'll make this introduction. Could be a number of things. And, what I've seen, and I'm guessing some of you have seen the same, is the follow-up takes place, but the follow-through doesn't. So what I mean is, I might go away and I might follow up with this person and send them what I told them I'd send them. But I'm not checking in a week later, 10 days later. Did you receive the information? Did you find it useful? Was it what you expected? Is there an action or something you'd like to do with it? That next piece of conversation, believe it or not, doesn't happen as often as we want to believe it happens. And that's why follow-up and follow-through has been a thing for us at Emergent for many years, because it's not enough to follow up with people. You also need to think through what else you can do to be helpful or move the needle, get an action from them. And this has been something that has brought this principle to life.
Alex, can I make a quick comment about the point number 3 here? I mean, you
Yes.
know, the 1 and 2, ultimately they are all the apple pie kind of things here that people should generally
Of course.
agree on. But then the whole question is of the execution. So when you say good collaboration, but then the point one, for example, you say active in conversations, so you have to actually, make an effort to speak up. But what I wanted to talk about 3 was the very last point that you say there, still acts when there's uncertainty. That's crucial. That easily tells, because many times people will back down saying, oh, well, we don't know, should we do this, should we do that? So we do nothing. And of course, doing nothing was also one of the options that you've taken. Maybe it was just too convenient and you've taken, maybe it wasn't even the other 2, maybe you did not know which one was better, but you could have agreed that either of them is better than this one, which is doing nothing, but still you choose to do nothing. So
that's right. And actually, one of the principles, I guess, not principles, that's a positive word. What I'm going to say is a bit more negative. One of the things that lives underneath the skin of this follow up and follow through, and not so much in the other 4 framework principles, is this thing that happens sometimes in business where somebody says, that's not my job, right? And I think one of the challenges is sometimes people inside companies forget that if they want to improve, Peter Drucker used to say, right, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Famous, he's got many famous quotes, probably most people know that one. What does he mean? He means that the whole organization understands the strategy, but what they understand deeper is that working together towards a common goal is more important than some picture we put on a slide that says, this is our strategy. And many times the way that it gets brought to life is you get people in the business that are initiating, being intentional, helping out, being good collaborators, and not saying to their colleagues, that's not my job. So we also need to be mindful that follow up and follow through can also mean that we get involved where we can be helpful, even if it doesn't map to our title or our department, if it's something we can do. Right, so I think we can carry on to the next slide and do our next poll question. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to highlight consistent follow-up and follow-through in your performance evaluations, given what we've talked about today?
I think this might be an easy one. So we probably won't give people a little bit too much time here. So please, if you would like, and in the meantime, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask, because I think we can head into the Q&A in a couple of minutes here. But we'll give you guys maybe 5 more seconds. Okay, so far only 50, not even, okay, now 50% people have voted. So please, let's go ahead and take 5 more seconds and go ahead and give your input here so we can get going. We are at touch under 60 here. I'm gonna wait till we just cross 60, maybe. Let's see. Okay. Or not. Maybe we don't. Maybe we're just here. Okay, we'll close it in 5 seconds here. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to highlight consistent follow-up through your performance here? Okay. So I'll go ahead and share the results. Alex, I think you, oh, I'm actually surprised to see that not more people saying 9. Okay, but Alex, you can.
Well, it's okay. I think, again, every organization is different. And also, I think you said something really important, Amrinder. You said some of the stuff is just motherhood and apple pie. And I think, yes, I think we said on the very first webinar, this framework is not going to tell anyone anything they don't already know in theory. In principle, no one should disagree with anything that has been said or put on the slides, because it is motherhood and apple pie. It's a very common sense oriented framework. And as Benjamin Franklin used to say, common sense isn't so common. So I guess the reality is none of us should be surprised by what's being stated, but what does it mean? It means that the easy things are the hardest things to do sometimes. And I guess this is where we find challenges. There's a reason that there are phrases that exist, like a phrase like, let's go back to the basics, because we often try to make very straightforward processes or approaches complex. And what this framework has tried to do is bring it back to a pragmatic and practical approach to say, look, we're people, we're humans working in a company together. And most of us spend the majority of our time at work, whether it's in a remote or in-person setting. And to do that effectively, we have to interact and behave with certain principles and values. So nothing that's been raised on any of these webinars would be revolutionary or be an epiphany for anyone. But what it should do is remind us all of the importance of simplicity in process. So obviously some here almost half think, yeah, it's important. It's slightly more important than, the next thing, but I wouldn't say it's urgent for me. Others would say, yeah, I probably need to go back and figure out how I can get more out of the organization, which brings us to this slide, which I think is a good slide for you to cover, Amrinder, because it has some compelling questions.
Right. I think they're just some of the things to consider as you all attended the webinar and you all took away some of the learnings. These are just some of the things that you may want to consider. And I think the Q&A, we're also headed into the Q&A. Is that right, Cynthia? So I can also combine that here together. I see a lot of people have already asked questions. I know we have about 10 minutes. I'm going to try to cover as many of them as possible here. And if we can get through it in the follow-up email, Neha will include our LinkedIn contacts information of Cynthia, myself, and Alex. So please connect. And whatever questions we could not answer, we will try to answer them offline. But just some other things that you want to consider is, how do you want to make your check-ins more frequent? How often it's happening now? How do you want to change it? What's the framework that you want to follow? How do you want to measure this thing? The concepts we agree with, but how will you measure this thing to say that, hey, is the consistent follow-up and follow-through actually happening? Is somebody doing better on that than the others? Are you running some kind of retrospective? So when things get completed, you can actually see, hey, did we do properly? Did we follow the principles to the best we could? Are the people in your organization, or organization might be too broad? You have 1,000, 1,500 people that we want to paint everybody with the same brush, but rather in each department, you can say, hey, is this department doing well? Is this subunit doing well in communication, over communicating, under communicating, where you want to go? So those are just some of the things. Again, those may not be the only things that to consider, but at least some way that you can frame your things here. So Cynthia, should I go into Q&A here? Actually, why don't we let Alex to just sum this part up here before we go to Q&A?
No problem. Just a couple slides just to kind of tell you a little bit about our work and what we do, and maybe that will help also explain why these principles matter so much. So just, you can see here, our whole messaging is around ideas to impact, right? We help companies take their most valuable ideas and get them into the hands of the right customers. And this, again, customers in some context are internal employees, sometimes it's external. But whether it's a digital product, whether it's a physical product, we work across several industries, and in each case, we're helping companies think better about work, kind of help them with their growth mindset shifts. We help them reskill and upskill their people, and we help them take their outcomes and get them delivered. This is what we've done for 14 years. This is what we do well. And then on the next slide, I guess it would be great to show you real brief how we do that through a lens of something we call VFQ. So VFQ are the 3 guiding principles Emergent operates by. They stand for value, flow, and quality. And the whole premise here has always been around helping companies deliver value early and often, optimize the flow of their work end to end, and then discover quality through fast feedback. These are 3 things that every customer we know has asked for. And when we do work with them, we're working with them in the context of getting them to see their work and their interactions differently than they've done in the past, because we really believe that one of the most important aspects of our value proposition is teaching companies how to run their own change and not have long-term dependency on an external provider. That sounds unorthodox, but it has served us well, and it's the way that we've developed our organization. And you can see just a small sample of some of the organizations we've worked with where we've helped bring that to life and teaching their people, in the thousands on how to take some of their work forward. So that's a little bit about us, and I think now would be a good time to go to Q&A.
Great. I'm gonna try to run through as many questions here as possible. So I'm just looking through the questions to say, so there's 3 or 4 people have asked the same question or similar variation. So I'm gonna ask that one first. We can probably knock all of them together here. The question here really, Alex, is on how frequently should goals be checked in? And I think, again, the question is in terms of goals, or at least that specific question. Somebody's asking how frequently should the follow-ups be done. I think I'll put them all together. So the question is asked in the context of goals, but I believe you can broaden the conversation to general work principles, work tasks, and any of those things as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, we are a performance-oriented business, and because we're working with customers regularly to deliver pieces of work and help them achieve their goals, we're typically working on one speed, fast. So for us, the best we can do is have check-ins with people, I believe, on a monthly basis, not a quarterly basis. So having a brief check-in with somebody on their objectives every 30 days is sensible. Doesn't have to be long meetings, especially when you can bring them into the Clay HR platform. You have the screen to look at. You can see where their objectives are mapped. It's a quick conversation you can have. But every organization is differently, and I would also say every role in every organization is different. So in our company, there are roles where monthly check-ins make more sense, and quarterly check-ins would also make sense. So, but if they're performance-oriented roles for us, or roles that are delivering something specific on a regular basis, I like the idea of a monthly check-in.
Okay, so I believe 3 or 4 questions were similar. So if you really meant something different from that, please feel free to ask it again. But otherwise, I'm considering all of them done. So here's another similar question. I think at least 2 people have asked this one. Is I'm gonna read that a minute. Okay, so basically asking, when is follow-up too much? Okay, and another, actually I'll read the other one too, because maybe there is a little bit of a difference here. So Sarah asks a little bit differently, so I'm just gonna ask it. For geographically dispersed teams, when is follow-up too much? What is the best way to follow up without sounding too pushy? So
I don't know the answer to that, because every company is different. When is follow-up too much or too pushy? I think that's something that has to be agreed between the individual and the manager.
On that point, I have seen, Alex, that at least there are some organizations where they have this mentality or methodology, not just mentality, that sounds negative, but methodology. They say that, hey, and I think maybe it's more like an individual persona to say, don't follow up with me ever. Just say, if you've given me an objective, until the day that it's due, don't follow up with me, and I will come to you at 50% of the time saying, hey, I don't think I'm going to make it. It's due in 1 month, but I will not make it. So I think there, the person is making the choice to say that, hey, I will have the discipline to tell you early to avoid that surprise if I'm going to hit something. Otherwise, if you assigned it to me, it's due on the September 30th, October 31st, just trust it'll be done. If it's not going to be done, I'll let you know as soon as I know. I won't come and tell you on November 1st that, oh, you know what, I couldn't do it. So I think some of that trust is earned, right? Some of the trust is earned that, hey, I told you I'm going to deliver it, and here on October 27th, I already say, okay, it's done. You can review it, but it's all done.
Mm-hmm.
But if I don't show up, I don't tell you anything until 31st, and on November 1st, you ask me, hey, how's it going? Well, let me tell you, then I've lost that trust. Then the next time when somebody asks you saying, hey, don't follow up with me, saying, yes, I wouldn't, But in the past when we've had these kind of due dates and we've had to slip, so I just want to make sure I can help you early. So I think there's a little bit of that angle to play there as well, especially from your perspective as a manager, as well as your angle as an employee, that if you want to, as a team member, you say, hey, I want to be given the autonomy, I'm putting that in quotes here, Alex, to autonomy to finish my work. Sure, you have the autonomy, but then as long as you continue to earn it, you'll be able to do that here, right?
Yeah, but I wouldn't support that. If someone said that to me, you don't get to tell me when you're going to show up for a follow-up. I think what sometimes people are misunderstanding, and this goes back to autonomy, is me checking in with you doesn't mean I don't trust you. It means that your job has interdependencies inside the company and affects other things that happen. So the ability to know what's happening in your role on a regular cadence, whether that's every 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 9 weeks, whatever we've agreed, isn't to say, hey, I need to check your homework. It's to say, your work is impacting this and this and this, and then we just need to know we're all heading in the right direction. Why? Because we don't want surprises. So I understand that autonomy principle. That's why I raised it earlier. But I think people miss the accountability aspect, and they think their homework's getting checked versus no, your work is actually part of an interdependent web of things that happen in a company. If you were just an isolated person doing one job and you had no dependencies, yeah, maybe we'd leave you alone and you can check in with us every quarter, no problem.
I believe, Alex, whoever heard the very last thing that you said should just simply frame it and put it there. Your work, okay. I'm going to try to reframe it. You tell me how I say it. Your work is not something isolated task, rather it is one in the series of, or a web of interdependent company outcomes. Did I catch it? I mean, what you said is exactly the point. There are a couple of more questions here. One of them is very system oriented. I'll just, I don't know if I can share my screen to answer that question, but the question here is, I don't know, Neha or Cynthia, how I can do that. But the question here is, anyway, if we don't have the time to do that, question is, how do you nest goals inside goals in Play HR? I mean, we may have some other videos which cover that, but I think just as an idea, when you go into a goal, you can select the parent goal here, and I might have an example here, but my screen isn't showing. Is it possible for me to share the screen, Neha? Or how would I do that? I can do that. Okay, sorry, I'm just figuring this out. Okay, I don't, maybe if you can make me the presenter and I'll be happy to click on the share button here, but I don't see that yet. But there was one question. Another question here, I'll ask the question anyway, is
share your screen now.
Okay, thank you. I do see that here. So I'm able to, I don't know if, did I do it right? Are you guys able to see the screen here with the goals? Is that what's showing up here? So, okay, so when you nest the goals, you just see the goals inside the goals here. I've just opened one here. Like, so for example, this goal here, I'm really hoping we're on the same screen. This goal on the Blakely Morgan is farmed out to 2 further sub goals here, child goals here. So if I go into this goal here, and assuming you can see this screen now with this particular goal here, you see this particular divide goals here. The distribute this goal button here. And in this, you can see how this goal is basically linked out to, found out to some child goals here. These 2 are here. And if I want to add more, I can add, but then I would have to change the weightage of them to something smaller. And there's this little linker icon here, which kind of shows you how to make sure that the changes to the child goal will affect the parent goal. So again, for these questions, feel free to ask your account manager. They'll walk you through it. But this is just something standard. And even if your menu, etc., looks different, I know that Alex's menu look different, but this wouldn't change this behavior. You would still be able to link the goals here. Okay, so hopefully that answers that. I know we are just at time here. I'm going to quickly try to go through some more questions here as much as I can here. 1 or 2 more here. Okay, so one question here, I believe this is this is probably not, you can just clarify this question here. How do you implement VFQ inside Glacier? So I don't think that was the intent of what you were clarifying, right? So maybe you can just clarify that. We don't implement VFQ inside Glacier. VFQ is a specific framework that, Alex, I mean, you can speak a little bit more to VFQ there if you like.
That's fine. VFQ is it's two things. It's a set of tools and IP we use to deliver our consulting services, but it's also a learning platform. VFQ is a learning platform that people can sign up for, take courses that are specific to agility, product and portfolio managers. So product managers, agile people, they use our courses and our content around the world to basically upskill themselves, and that's one way to use it, but it's also the way that we deliver our consulting work.
Right. So if you have questions about VFQ, feel free to talk to Cynthia. Feel free to talk to Alex, and they'll be able to guide you a little bit on how exactly it is. And you know, if that makes great sense for your organization, that's great, and they'll be the right people to walk through. Seeing if there's any other. I know there are a couple of other questions we didn't. There's one question about check-ins. How can we give enough space to everyone to voice their true state of mind? I think that may be a culture question here. So Alex, and I think that'll be the last question we'll have time to take today. So the question was, when we're doing things through manager and report, how do we give people enough space to voice their?
Well, again, I think that's it's an open-ended question because it's specific, but I guess for us, the idea of having the framework on the Clay HR platform and having the person be part of the process of, you know, the assessment, the objective setting, the check-ins and the retrospective, and having a cadence that we've agreed means the conversation is often and happening, and allows a relationship to be developed. So if it's a personal thing, right? If someone needs space, they have to tell their manager what they need, and they have to work on what that means. That doesn't exist in a system or a platform. That's a working principle between a manager and employee. That's how I would answer that.
Right, and I agree. I won't take anything away from that, but I'll add one thing to it, is that because you know using these goals and objectives, etc., key results, all of that is available through your mobile app, right? So you can always be updating it. So that gives you a little bit of, as a team member, that flexibility to say, hey, we are you know, all my updates are here. The manager cannot be surprised by it, saying, hey, if I said it was a 36%, it's really a 36%. I don't have any false expectation that the manager should think, oh, I should be at 75%. No, as I've shared, I'm only at 36% today. It was good or bad, but at least you have the right picture, and therefore you have, in a sense, already shared your true state of work. So that gives you the further flexibility to share your true state of mind. So with that, I think there are a few more questions we didn't get to, but thank you for everyone who stuck till the end here, as we covered a few minutes over. But thank you, Cynthia. If you would like to wrap up here, we've covered as many as we could here.
Sure. Thank you all for joining, and you can follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter at Emergin to stay up to date on all of our content and events. And thank you so much all for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
day.
you, Alex, Cynthia, and Neha.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.